Hey guys, Prowl 1701 here, and today let's review Season 14 of Doctor Who. So, Tom Baker's third season, the final season of the Hinchcliffe era with Philip Hinchcliffe and Robert Holmes. This one is often held in high regards. It's usually Season 13 and 14 battling it out as Tom's best season for people. Interestingly enough, I find Season 14 a bit overrated. It's probably the most overrated Tom season. Now, it's still a good season. Don't get me wrong. Every Tom season is a good season. I don't think Tom Baker has a bad season. And Season 14 is a good season. I don't have the love for it that I do for Seasons 13 and 12. And I don't have the love for it that some other people have for Season 14. I know there are some people out there, 14 they think is Tom's best season or it's their favorite season. I have a lot of problems with this season. And a lot of it is, for me, it only has one stone cold masterpiece in it. One story that's just phenomenal Doctor Who, amazing. It has a lot of other really good stories, some underrated stories, some overrated stories. But only one where I'm just like, you gotta see that. And another problem is, I think the two most overrated stories possibly in all of classic Doctor Who both come from this season. Not just one, both of them are in this season. That causes me problems. On the other hand, I also feel like two of the stories from this season are underrated and don't get the attention they deserve and are good stories. Now, I do like the fact there is more variety in this season than Season 13. Season 13 does have that gothic horror feel, even though the stories are very different individually, to be fair. I mentioned that in the Season 13 review. I like the fact that there were differences there. But Season 14 does have more of a variety with Mask of Mandragora. You still have the horror aspect there, but I like that it's set in this old Italian neighborhood. The same place where they filmed a lot of The Prisoner, I believe, actually. I like the feel it has to it. And then you have The Hand of Fear, which also has a bit of a horror element early on into it before diving more into sci-fi horror and falling apart at the end. Deadly Assassin is a nice trip back to Gallifrey, which is realized fairly well on the classic Doctor Who budget. The horror aspect for it comes more with the look of the Master, with that decaying, barely alive body he's in. That adds a little horror aspect to it. Kind of makes me think of Skeletor before Skeletor, actually. And then this kind of surreal nature of when the Doctor is in the Matrix kind of adds to that too, even if him being in the Matrix really doesn't do a lot for me. It's surreal and trippy, but it's not really my bag. You had The Face of Evil, which has its own horror elements to it, I feel, with especially one of the cliffhangers with the Who Am I, and the Doctor figuring out what's going on. Face of Evil is a good combination of some horror elements with future sci-fi to it, which I like. Robots of Death is very much a murder mystery, an Agatha Christie murder mystery, with Talons at the end being a Victorian piece, basically a Sherlock Holmes Victorian tale murder mystery with some splashes of Phantom of the Opera in there, which is executed very well. Tom Baker continues to be amazing. I love how he performs this role. Tom Baker, especially in the Hinchcliffe era, he has those serious moments he pulls off really well. I love in Mask of Mandragora when the Count's like, "Can you see the future?" Sometimes. Can you tell my future? No. Why not? Because you don't have a future. I love that. The way Tom Baker delivers that line. I love that. The way he does his companion departure with him and Sarah is really well done. And I love the fact that Sarah and Tom were allowed basically to improv that, to write that the way they wanted. I think that was the right choice, and it comes across well. You get that implication that there's a lot not being said between them, that there's more not being said than is being said, and I like that. And I love some of the humorous bits in Face of Evil that he has, like with the arrow. That's either a really good shot or a really bad. And then, when he's like, now do as I tell you, or I'll kill him with this deadly jelly baby. I love stuff like that. So season 14 very much does hit differently to me from seasons 12 and 13, which I consider to be the pinnacle of Doctor Who. Season 14, I would even, like, if I'm ranking the Tom Baker seasons, there's a chance season 14's at the bottom. Not necessarily. That's actually really hard to do, because it depends on what I'm going for. It objectively has better production values due to the rampant inflation not hitting toward partway through next year, which just plagued the poor Williams era. And these stories are objectively pretty good for the most part, but not all of them just resonate with me. I don't care with what some of them are doing, and some of them do structurally have some problems. Whereas, again, later seasons have that inflation problem. They also have an issue of being mixed bag seasons in a lot of cases, season 15 in particular. That would actually be a really good video comparing season 14 and 15 and which one I think is better, or which one I prefer, because objectively season 14 is better, I think. But trying to decide which one I personally like better between them and why would actually be tricky, because 15 does stumble a bit toward the end, whereas 14 stays pretty solid throughout and goes and ends on such a high note with its season finale, as I do consider Talons to be Tom Baker's best season finale. So Mask of Mandragora I enjoy, as I mentioned briefly already. I like the guest cast. I mean, the one guy who's kind of the sorcerer, that beard of his looks really fake. He's a little over the top, not much to distract from the story. I find the beard more distracting than anything. I do like his outfit with that mask. That mask looks really cool. It's very iconic, I feel like, that mask. It's just the first thing I think of when the Mask of Mandragora is that mask. They did a really good job coming up with a design for him to wear with that kind of purple cloak and mask. That really works really well and sticks in my head. The guy playing the Count is really good. The guy playing the Prince is really good. The guy playing the Prince's friend is really good. And of course, Tom and Sarah are great in it. I also like the fact that Mask of Mandragora does touch on something that Classic Who doesn't really touch on. The fact that wherever the TARDIS team goes, they can understand what people are saying. When they're on an alien planet, it's in English. When they go back in time to old-timey Italy, you know, they can understand what they're saying. I like the fact that it touches on that. Now, it doesn't explain it the way Modern Who does, with it being the TARDIS translated, but I do like the fact that when Sarah asks about it, you know, Tom gives that explanation of, you know, that's a gift I share with you. I like the fact that it at least acknowledges it and gives at least some, vague perhaps, but some kind of answer to it, to where you know that is something the Doctor or Time Lord or TARDIS related that he is doing, so that the Doctor and the companion can always understand what language is being spoken. I just like that that's touched on here. I don't really care for Sarah getting hypnotized and almost sacrificed. I love Sarah Jane. She's my favorite companion, but I felt like as her time went on, she got reduced more and more to just generic companion. I never like when Sarah gets hypnotized or almost sacrificed, and she gets both in this story. She almost gets sacrificed, she gets drugged and almost sacrificed, then she gets hypnotized. In the story right after this one, she gets hypnotized. That really grates on me, because I feel like Elizabeth Sladen deserved better, and I feel like Sarah Jane deserved better. Still a great performance in this. And I love the location work in this. I enjoy the story. The ending is resolved a little too easily, I feel like, with them defeating the Mandragora and the people it's working with. When the guy's trying to electrocute the Doctor, but he keeps just shooting the chest plate. I'll shoot him in the head, the leg, the arm. Just stick with the chest plate. It just feels a little too easy. I do love the bit at the end when the Doctor's like, I wouldn't say no to a salami sandwich. And he says it in that way that's just so Tom Baker. It's just so Tom Baker. And then at the end of the story, he's got the salami like over his shoulder. I love that. I don't know why, but I love that. It's an underrated story, Mask of Mandragora. I'm not saying it's essential Doctor Who, but I am saying it doesn't get the credit it deserves. I think it's a very solid story. Hand of Fear is the weakest for me. And that's all because of episode 4. It just falls apart. The first 3 episodes are pretty good. I don't like the fact that Sarah gets mind controlled again after having just gotten mind controlled the story before. But Elizabeth Sladen's performance here is really good with her. Eldred must live. her performance is great in this. I love Tom's performance in this. You can see how much these two people care about each other. The bond they have, whether you want to see it as friendship, whether you want to see it as more than that. It's very rare, I would say, there are times with the Doctor where it could have been more than that. But I like that it's ambiguous here, to where if you ever want to think that maybe there was a little more to it than friendship, I'm fine with that here. Just because the chemistry between these actors and the chemistry between these characters is so well done. Typically, I don't like the Doctor to be romantic. I've talked about this several times. I don't like that. I prefer him to be friends with his companions. This is the one occasion where I'd almost let it slide. But part of that is just because it's done in such an ambiguous way that it leaves it up to the viewer to decide that, instead of cramming your storyteller, showrunner opinion down their throat. It lets the viewer decide. If you just want them to be friends, fine. If you want them to be more than that, you can see that too. And I do like how it threads that needle. And the Doctor's concern for Elizabeth when it collapses, and he's trying to get her out from under it. And then the departure is really well handled. As I mentioned earlier in the video, it's one of the best companion departures, and you get that feeling of so much not being said between them, because the Fourth Doctor isn't the kind of person to be open about that, like say the 10th Doctor would, or the 8th Doctor would. He's much more closed off about that. Again, a very alien Doctor about that kind of thing. But it still comes across in that goodbye between them, the bond they have, which I really like. I think the female Eldrad is really good. I like her design. I like her performance. You lose me when they get in episode 4. When they go to Eldrad's home planet, which isn't realized the best, when we get the male Eldrad played by Stephen Thorne, which nothing against Stephen Thorne, it's just a little too bombastic, and the performance just isn't as memorable as the female Eldrad. And plus, when I hear Stephen Thorne, all I hear is Omega. I'm just so used to that being Omega's voice, I can't unhear that. So it pulls me out of the story. The same problem I have with the Daemons. It just pulls me out of the story a bit, because I'm like, oh, that's Omega's voice actor. And I lose my suspension of disbelief, basically, there. It just pulls me out. Also, the scene when Eldrad trips over the scarf and falls is choreographed so badly, I can't take it seriously. It just falls apart in episode 4. If episode 4 had been executed better, this story would have a much higher place, I think. Not just in my own opinion, but I think a lot of other fans' opinions as well. Then we have the Deadly Assassin, which is a tricky one. Because the Deadly Assassin, if you just treat it on its own merits, is fine. It's good. It's nice to see the Doctor without a companion on Gallifrey, basically with no help, having to do it himself. It's a nice adventure. This is an interesting take on the Master. You get this surreal stuff going on in the Matrix. You get the idea of the Matrix a couple decades before the movie The Matrix. And it's the same idea, and it's even called The Matrix. I wonder if the Wachowskis ever saw this episode. So that's interesting to me, too. Everything going on there. And, of course, I love having Bernard back playing a Time Lord. I always like when he shows up in Doctor Who. It's when I start looking at what this does to the lore and what it does to the Time Lords as a whole, I start having problems. Now, this is the story that introduced the 12 regeneration limit, which I'm fine with. I don't mind there being a limit there, even though we have to admit that is a bit of a retcon. Timeless Children wasn't the first retcon. The worst retcon, yes, but not the first retcon. Deadly Assassin did retcon that to there being only 12 regenerations in this story, which is fine. That doesn't bother me. But I don't like how it portrays the Time Lords here. This is the story that really sent the Time Lords downhill for me, and they've never recovered from it. They just feel like squabbling humans complaining about sore hips and being politics and politicians and a Weasley little reporter. They don't have that omnipotent gods who oversee the universe to them anymore. They just feel like people. And that's not as interesting. That's just not as interesting to me as the War Game Time Lords. I want to see more of that. Here, they're just bickering, squabbling people who can very much make mistakes. Lots of mistakes. And it's just uninteresting. Also, the set design just doesn't wow me here. I mean, it's classic Who, it's on a budget, but Something about the sets just don't wow me here. Also, the dream sequences, they're neat, they're surreal. They don't do much for me. I kind of get bored when all that stuff's going on. It's trippy and interesting, but I just zone out whenever he's in the Matrix. I do like the ending. I love the Master's design. But yeah, this one's really hard for me to really talk about. Because I like some things about it. I don't like some things about it. I don't like what it did to the Time Lords as a whole. It's definitely one of the most overrated stories Doctor Who has ever done. It's one of the 2 most overrated stories. I said both of them are from this season. This is one of them. Then we move into Face of Evil, which I find underrated. I think Face of Evil is a great introduction for Leela. First off, the jungle set. You guys have probably caught on by now. I like jungle sets in Classic Who because they tend to be done well. I love the Planet of Evil set. Let's just be honest. That set, top notch. I enjoy the Creature from the Pit jungle set as well, which you can tell was shot on film. Looks really good. I like the jungle set in this one. I think it's realized really well. I feel like the mountain with the Doctor's face on it is not done well. It looks very much like a model, unfortunately. I do wish, if we ever got updated effects for this story, that they kind of redid the mountain to make it look a little more epic. It just looks like a little plaster model here, which is a little disappointing, but fine. I love Louise Jameson as Leela. She really nails it right out of the gate with this story. It's just being Leela. Leela's one of my favorite companions. And her and the Doctor, again, have good chemistry together. They said the evil one eats babies. The evil one. Well, I do think that's a bit of a... I love that exchange between them. And then Tom Baker kind of playing dual roles here, as he also plays the computer, which I enjoy. And the effect of when Tom's face appears as the computer is a very impressive effect. I think for the time and for the budget, that effect is really good and very effective. I like the guest cast in this a lot, including the one guy who's the kind of shaman, the bald-headed guy. He's good in this. He ends up kind of helping save the day at the end. Because you kind of think you're like, oh, God, it's one of these guys, one of these characters. But he actually turns out being very helpful at the end, so I like that as well. I don't really care for the guys who live inside the head. I don't like their outfits. Something about their outfits bother me. Plus the fact they're all, welcome, Time Lord. We've been expecting you to... Oh, we don't like you at all, actually. It just seems like quite a bit of a twist. Although I do believe this is the one that has the Doctor's quote about the... the very rich and the very stupid have one thing in common. They don't alter their views to fit the facts. I love that speech. They alter the facts to fit their views. I love that. I love that speech. It's such a good speech. And trust me, politically here in America these days, a very apt speech. Very apt. Although I'm sure my friends over in the UK and probably the rest of the world would probably say the same thing in 2024. But I do like that saying, and that it's in this episode right before a hypnotized Leela tries to attack the Doctor. And it has some good cliffhangers in it as well. I enjoy Face of Evil. And the fact that Leela doesn't get invited, she just dives into the TARDIS and he's like, come out of there. Don't press that! I love that. And then we have Robots of Death, which is the other most overrated story in classic Doctor Who. I like Robots of Death. Robots of Death is good, but as I have said on this channel numerous times, the reason I like Robots of Death is not the story, it's how well it's executed on screen. Much like the God Complex, although in that case, I think the God Complex in Modern Who has a story that's complete rubbish. It's just junk. But it's executed and directed really well on screen, so it gets props for that. Robots of Death, script is fine. It's not great. It's fine. It's okay. I mean, it's nothing to write home about. It's the execution on screen and the directorial choices made that make it work. I love the robot designs. This is some of the best robot designs in all of Doctor Who, classic or modern. I love the robot designs. They're iconic, they're memorable, and they hold up. I feel like they hold up really well. You could revisit these robots in Modern Who, and I just feel like that look is iconic. Also, the set of the ship I really like. I love that it doesn't go for that industrial look like, say, the Nostromo and Alien. It has this luxury look to it, like you're on a luxury cruise instead of being at work. And the fact the crew seem able to dress in whatever they want instead of wearing work uniforms. They look more like passengers on a cruise, kind of dressed to relax and leisure, even though they're working a mining job. I like that. My hat's off to those employers. Yeah, give me something like that to where even though you're working, you feel like you can kick back and relax and enjoy yourself and you're comfortable. I love those design choices. That was what makes the story interest me. The actual story, I don't care for. I find it a bit hum-ho. It's a murder mystery that on first watch I think is fine, but on rewatch just doesn't do much for me. And this is coming from someone who loves murder mysteries. I have Columbo right here. I've seen every episode of Columbo numerous times. I love going back and rewatching it. It's a great show. It's a murder mystery that works. Same thing with stuff like Perry Mason, Monk, stuff like that. But for some reason, just here, I'm not engaged on rewatch. Also, the one guy who goes crazy and kind of has the fear of robots or whatever, I don't quite know why that's there. It's just there. But yeah, most of the time when I'm watching this one, it's because I'm enjoying what I'm seeing on screen. The story's just, This one, I just feel like it's so overrated. Like, I get if people like it for the reasons I like it, like the design choices. But I don't understand the people who just think the story is just top-notch story. I just don't see that. Again, that's just my opinion. But I feel like it's very overrated, very overrated. And then, of course, we end with Talons of Wing Chiang, which is indeed a masterpiece. I love Talons. I love the location work. I love the sets. I love the characters. I love the cast. I love the Doctor's performance. I love Leela's performance. I love the little bits of humor in there, like Leela eating the meal and she just grabs it with her hands, and then Lightfoot just watches her and he just grabs it and dives it. I love the little things like that. The little things are nice. I love the standoff between Chang and the Doctor when Chang is performing on stage and he's aiming the gun and the Doctor's daring him to shoot him. I love the bit when the Doctor is supposed to be a volunteer in the thing and he turns around and walks out of it and Chang makes the comment of, seems like one of us is yellow. That's just funny because, again, Chang is Asian, so I love the little double joke there. I found it amusing. And the audience seemed to too, because they laughed at the joke, which was funny. I love how well written Chang is as a character. He's a very developed character, I feel like, because I really love how when he's on stage performing, he speaks in that very broken English, like he's playing to the crowd, like that's how the crowd would expect him to speak, which is great at kind of taking a puck shot there at taking shots there at Victorian views. Because, let's be honest, this story is a bit of a satire, if you think about it. Bob Holmes is good at that kind of thing. But when he's speaking normally off stage, he talks in a very proper English, a very, very full English. He's not talking in that broken English. So I just love the little bit of character there that's added with that. I enjoy that. And how even Chang, while he thinks Wing Chiang, that the character Magnus Grill is Wing Chiang, the fact he still questions him at times, like, if I try to take two at once, I like little things like that. I love the character of Magnus Grill. That's a cool character, very Phantom of the Opera style thing. I love the fact they didn't just try to make him the master, that it is its own villain, and how the Doctor knew who he was, and how the Doctor rubs it into his face that his scientific experiments were a huge cul-de-sac that went nowhere, just to shove his face into it. And I love the fact Magnus Grill got his comeuppance and how he was stopped. And of course I love Jago and Lightfoot. Just the actors playing them are just so good. Very impressive. It's just all around a good story. I love the nighttime shoots. The rat looks a bit napped. The CGI helps that though. I prefer this with the original effects or the updated effects. Either way, I don't actually have a preference. I like it both ways. I feel like it's Tom's best season finale and very much one of his best stories. The season really does end on a high note with Talons. Plus, I love the Doctor's Sherlock Holmes outfit. I'm glad they went with it on the cover of the season 14 set. That's just a cool outfit. I'd love to see another story kind of done like this with that. I don't really know how to articulate what I mean to say, but I really like Talons a lot. It's a really good story. So, if I was rating them, if I was ranking the season from worst to best, I think I would definitely have Hand of Fear at the bottom. It's the only one that I borderline don't really care for, just because the ending lets it down. Although the departure scene does kind of make up for it. But it's easily my least favorite, even though the first 3 episodes are really good. So Hand of Fear at the bottom. The next one, it's really hard to pick between the overrated two. I would say Robots of Death, second from the bottom. Again, the story just doesn't do much for me. And there's some stuff in there I'm like, I mean, that's actually the best way to summon them. Like the guy who has the weird fear of robots. I'm like, you could have just cut that out. Why is that there? Next would be The Deadly Assassin. Again, just kind of ruins the Time Lords while being a fine story if you're just watching it in a bubble. And then I would say The Mask of Mandragora, which I enjoy. Again, underrated story. Then I would say Face of Evil, and with Talons, of course, being number 1 of the season. The one real standout story that I would just call amazing. And that's another thing, I think, between season 13 and 14, is 13 just has so many really good stories. Just amazing stories. Whereas 14 just doesn't have as many for me. It has 3 that are really, really good, whereas the other 3 are good. But it only has 3 that are just good. Like, Android Invasion would beat out 3 of the stories this season easily. Maybe even more, to be honest. Season 13 just has so many good stories. Season 12 has so many good stories. Whereas the only one that just blows my mind in 14 is Talons, even though I still think Face of Evil and Mask of Mandragora are really good. And I can enjoy the other stories. None of the stories this season are bad. I wouldn't call any of them bad. There's certainly worse stories out there. I mean, they're all better than The Invasion of Time, let's be honest. They're all better than Power of Kroll. They're all better than The Leisure Hive, etc., etc., etc. But they don't grab me, perhaps, the way they do some people. I just don't hold this season in such high esteem as I do the other 2 seasons in the Hinchcliffe era, or as highly as some other people seem to, where some people would call the weak link of the Hinchcliffe era, if there is such a thing, to be season 12. I would disagree. It's definitely season 14 for me, while still being a good season. All of Tom's seasons are. And objectively, I feel like it's pretty well made, especially from a budget standpoint, what they had available. It definitely doesn't show the budget problems that season 15 would start to show with the huge inflation they got hit with that year, and that would continue to plague the Williams era as well, which is nice. It looks good on screen because of that, but some of the stories just don't resonate for me personally. So that's my thoughts on season 14, which in a way it could almost be considered a hot take, because I just don't hold it in the esteem that some people do. It's still a good season. It would still rank highly if I was ranking the era, because it's a Tom Baker season, and I tend to love Tom Baker's era and Tom Baker's Doctor. And you have 2 of my favorite companions of all time in it. So I would still rank the season highly, but I would not stack it up there with seasons 12 or 13 like some people would, personally. So I want to know what you think of this video and what you think of season 14 and how you would rank the stories in season 14. So comment down below and let's talk about it. Don't forget to click the like button and the subscribe button as well. All the other fun stuff that's down there in the description of the video, links to the Patreon, links to the Amazon wish list, links to the Amazon UK wish list, which I've updated recently. If you would like to support me that way, I want to give a shout out to Colin Coney, one of my top tier patrons. I appreciate his support, as I do the support of all of my patrons. It's very much appreciated. And most importantly, thank you for watching.